Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining us for this very special virtual leader chat during Pride Month. Before we begin, I want to take some time to honor the lives of the 215 Indigenous children whose bodies were found buried at a former residential school in Kamloops, British Columbia. Our hearts go out to all the First Nations communities during this time of mourning. Canada's residential school system has had such a devastating and lasting impact on First Nation communities, which is still felt today. We need truth before genuine reconciliation can happen. There is so much more work that needs to be done. As you know, our flag at the Pickering office has been lowered to half-mast in their honor. And at this time, we're going to have 215 seconds of silence in order to, in memory of the victims. We're going to put the picture of the flag up. I know that this is a longer time for moments of silence. And this morning on the gratitude call, we did a moment of silence, and I thought they had a really great suggestion to use this time that we're going to spend in silence to really think about what we can do to make the world a better place and make someone's day better. So I'll now ask that the flag goes up and we start our 215 seconds. Thank you, everyone. Those 215 seconds were very important for all of us to share together. I'd now like to ask Daryl and Crystal to come on screen with me for our virtual leader chat, opening up Pride Month. Daryl and Crystal, are you there? There we go. Oh, wow, you guys are in sync for that. So I'd like to introduce Daryl Bowden. He's the Executive Director in the Office of the Vice President of Equity and Community Inclusion at Ryerson University. His
Hi,
work at
everyone.
Ryerson.
Sorry.
Thanks for coming, Daryl. No, that's okay. I got a little bit more of your intro, and then we're going to have Crystal share why she chose you to come in today.
Great.
So Darrell's work at Ryerson has played a crucial role in helping the university to create important initiatives and programs to support the LGBTQ2+ employees and students. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation today. I think it's something that is long overdue for us as an organization. And we also have Crystal Ramdeo, Supervisor of Talent Acquisition in our HR team, and a familiar face to us on these virtual leader chats. So Crystal, I know that you put Darrell's name forward. Maybe you could let us know why.
Sure. So I met Daryl a few years ago in a previous life through his consulting work when I worked in the education sector. And you know, they say it takes 3 to 7 seconds to form a first impression of somebody. And I remember my first interaction with Daryl, and I remember he came to my office door, and I knew instantly that this is someone who was not only knowledgeable, but somebody who was going to be able to help with the challenging diversity and inclusion issues we had, but also somebody that I was just going to learn from just talking to. You know, Daryl has a way of providing and giving, for lack of better words, just real talk on some very controversial topics. And he was the very first person to help me realize that diversity and inclusion, it's about a movement and transformational culture change and not just a moment in time. And the last thing that I'll leave you with, and to why I recommended Daryl, is even before COVID-19, even before George Floyd, and I want to get the year right, I think it was in 2013, he did this TED Talk, and it was called Finding Opportunity in Identity. And it was in that TED Talk where he was talking about all the things that many people are living and experiencing now. And I think it is a good leadway into the conversation that you, Nicole, and Daryl are going to have today about finding opportunity and identity in the month of Pride. So I will leave it over to you guys, and it was great to see you both.
Thank you, Crystal.
Thanks, Crystal.
And I know already from our prep call that we're definitely going to learn a lot from you. And I agree with Crystal's words that it's a movement. I apologize for my little dog here. That it is a movement that we're going through. Thank you for being here with us today.
Oh, no, thanks for inviting me. This is a topic that's near and dear to my heart, and I do enjoy being able to get out and actually engaging with folks around this one.
What's really important, this is, I think, the first time we were having this conversation at MPAC. And as I mentioned, it's a very important conversation. We've been in our equity, diversity, and inclusion journey now for just under a year. You know, we've celebrated Pride Month before, but this is the first time we've had this conversation. So what I'd like to hear maybe from you to start us off is a little bit of history of Pride in Canada, how it first began and how it's being celebrated.
Okay, well, Pride as a space, as a movement, actually began in New York around, I would say, in 1969, the Stonewall riots. A number of Black drag queens engaged with police. I think her name Marsha P. Johnson threw her pump and hit one of the cops in the head, and riots took place for a number of days. And so things started in New York around Pride. Then in Toronto, in terms of supporting that, we saw Pride events, Pride picnics, a number of items relating to Pride through the 70s. And then it went from being sort of a Pride Day, Pride weekend to a Pride week. In 1981, there was a series of bathhouse raids where 150 plainclothes Metro Toronto police officers entered one of the bathhouses, a space called, I think it was the Club Baths at the time. And they arrested approximately 300 people, largely because they were gay in that space. And so they called this Operation Soap. I still haven't quite understood that concept, but you know, we put tags on things sometimes that we're not supposed to understand. But following that, the Operation Soap, there were a number of raids and violent raids, and then there were a lot of protests. There was a lot of rioting in the city, and folks just, again, turned into mass rallies. I think we fast forward now, I think it was no, it was close to, yeah, it was later part of the 1990s where Pride was first recognized by the city of Toronto. And that's when we started having these larger celebrations to where we are now, probably the second or third largest Pride celebration in the world, seeing over 1 million people. When we're able to be on the streets, engaging in just the revelry and the fun associated with Pride. I think now where we're in the virtual space, probably been more than 1 million people that might tune in. And so again, opportunities abound for folks to actually learn more about Pride.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing history. So we have Pride Month. What's the purpose of Pride Month, in your opinion?
The way I see it is it's a celebration. It's an opportunity for folks to be free, to feel comfortable with who they are, to feel that they are accepted. But it also has a political side to it, because let's face it, this as a movement was as a result of raids and a result of people being arrested. And so the idea was, again, how do we create a space where folks feel that they are engaged and that they are welcomed into the community? The fact that Pride has gone from a day to a week to now being a month-long series of events means that there's a lot of movement in the right direction. There's a lot of acceptance in terms of who queer people are in the world. Doesn't mean that we're out of the woods yet, and doesn't mean that we're done, because there's still a lot that we need to do, but at least we're moving in strides in the right direction.
Absolutely. Now, what about the flag, the beautiful Pride flag? I was looking through my closet if I could have pulled it all off today. I was able to get a bit of pink. It wasn't. There we go. So, give me some of the significance of the Pride flag.
Well, the flag was it was an opportunity for a gentleman who was an artist in the early days of Pride to actually come up with a symbol that represented the community. This has gone through a number of iterations. This was the 2015-16 version. There's now a newer version that's brought in some additional colors on the side here. The colors represent particular things. So in the original flag, there was the 6 colors. So red was life, orange was healing, yellow was sunlight, the green was nature, the blue was harmony, and then the purple was spirit. The original flag also had 2 colors. There was a lighter blue and a sort of a turquoise color that represented the transgender community at the time. But when it went through silk screening, those colors didn't show up, so they were moved out. Being brought back now in terms of how the flag looks currently. So now what you have in terms of the brown and the blue, or the brown and the black that are at the top, this represents our Black and our people of color communities. And then again, the idea of there being the light blue, the pink, that's the transgender community. That's now been added back onto the flag. So it makes it a little bit, I don't know if I can show you this one, makes it a little bit different in terms of what we've seen, but it's definitely a change. And it's like the community in terms of the change around how folks identify and how folks show up. It's that representation of the community.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, like everything, it's an evolution. And you mentioned a moment ago, it was Pride Day, Pride Week, Pride Month. So we've evolved there. Now corporations are getting more involved with corporate sponsorship with Pride. What do you think about the impact that's had on the evolution and the development?
I think it's been really, in a lot of ways, I think it's been really beneficial. It's helped with the momentum and help things to grow. Let's face it, an event the size of the Pride Parade cannot happen for free, right? So someone has to do the cleanup, someone has to do crowd control, someone has to, those porta potties are really important because sometimes the businesses are locked up. You got to find a place to go. Those things have to be paid for. Entertainers, because we want to make sure that the community has what they're looking for. We have to pay for the entertainers to be involved in those things. So again, the corporate sponsorship, yes, sometimes it does feel like it's a sellout. But again, when you think about all the other incidentals that go along with creating an event this size, it's necessary. And so corporate sponsorship is really, really important and really helpful to be able to pay for and keep the process moving.
Excellent. I want to switch gears a little bit. In our pre-call a few weeks ago, we talked a little bit about intersectionality and the impact of what it means to many people in the LGBTQ2S plus community. So can you just share with us what is intersectionality?
Okay, here's my understanding of intersectionality. Everybody that's engaging with us today, everybody that's on this call, has multiple characteristics by which they can identify. So another way of looking at it is we are not one identity. So for example, I identify as a Black, Mi'kmaq, 7th generation Canadian who is a cisgendered male, who is also gay, father of 2 young Black boys, aged 10 and 14. That's where you see some of the gray hairs. Second youngest of 11 children in my family, and we're all from rural Nova Scotia. So again, this idea of intersectionality is those spaces where interconnected natures or natural activity or social determinations such as race, class, gender, they're really regarded as overlapping items. So all of the items that I've listed as being part of my identity are things that are important to me. And so these are parts of what make me who I am. And similar to everybody else that's on this call, all of these things inform the way in which I show up. They inform the work that I do, they inform the decisions that I make, they inform the way in which I interact with people. And so on top of all of that, they overlap with oppressions. So whether it's discrimination, harassment, systemic situations, there's an overlay of these differences, these elements of identity that when we look at a situation, it's not just today I'm going to be Black and that's all you're going to get, or today I'm only going to be gay because that's what we're talking about, is only the gay world, so I'm only going to be gay. It doesn't work that way. All of these things make me who I am, just as all of the items make you who you are. And when those things come into situations or come into being areas of issue, it's not just one piece that actually has to be looked at. There are multiple pieces.
No, that's so I'm going to layer in, because I mentioned to all of you a few moments ago, I did my IDI assessment and I had my debrief, and that was one of the questions. We spoke so much about culture and how it shapes you, where you grew up, what your community was like, the color of your skin, your religion, all these types of things. It's so multifaceted and different dimensions, and that is how we show up. Right? We bring that to the table. So I think that's really important.
And one of the things that's really important about that as well is the fact that as a self-identified Black man, as a racialized body, it's important for me to actually talk about those cultural cues and those cultural boxes that I fit into, because it's one of those situations where if I don't tell people who I am, someone's going to put me in another kind of box. So I'll end up somewhere that I'm not comfortable being. And so it's one of those things around making sure that folks really know who I am, are really able to identify and engage with me in a way that allows them to better understand where there might be work for them to do as well. Because if somebody has an aspect of their identity that you're not sure of, you don't know anything about, this is your chance. Talk to this person that's in front of you about what's it like to be 7th generation Canadian, be more Canadian than our prime minister, but he makes more money. Again, it's that conversation piece, right? You can look at any aspect of somebody's identity to be able to then engage with them around topics, or you can look into the community and explore and find out more. So for example, folks who are on the call who, don't know if you know somebody that's from the queer community. If you haven't attended a Pride event, it's all virtual. Get online and be part of the community. That's one of the ways of learning and understanding how you can engage.
It's so important. And again, I'm going to use myself. We talk about learning, as you just mentioned, and engaging. And the advice I was given, because I'm in a learning journey as well, is to be curious, and curious with the right intentions. Because I think what happens with a lot of people, me included, is you're fearful of saying the wrong thing. You're fearful of asking the wrong question. And so the advice I was given is state your intentions, that you are curious, you are trying to learn, and then ask the question. One of the things you shared in our prep call is you said to me, one of the things that fascinates you is when people say, when did you know you were gay? And you
I
like
love
to
that.
say that.
I love that because my way of responding to that is, what did you know you were straight? I mean, it's one of those really innocuous kinds of questions. Of it wasn't something I woke up one morning and said, "Oh, okay, I'm going to engage in same-sex relationships," and then live with all the negativity, name calling, and all the trauma that goes along with being in this community. Nobody chooses to do that. Nobody wakes up and decides to do that. It's just who I am. So this question about when did you know you were gay it's always been one of those fun ones for me.
Yeah, absolutely. So I used your story actually in my in my debrief, right? Because it's all about how do you learn and how can you be curious, but also get over that fear of
Yeah.
of asking the wrong thing. And the advice I was given, and I share it with everyone here, is have the right intention and share it openly. And that's the only way you're actually going to learn, is immersing yourself and asking the questions and being vulnerable. We've talked a lot about
Oh yes.
vulnerable.
Yeah. I think the other thing is that, there's this whole desire for people to ask the question of, so what do I do to help? How do I do this? Because I don't want to say the wrong thing, or I don't want to do the wrong thing. It's going to happen. You're going to make mistakes. We're human. We're not infallible. I'm not a machine. I make mistakes all the time. It's about owning those mistakes. So it's about recognizing, okay, it's like saying somebody's name, right? The name is something that you haven't seen before. I tell people right up front, I'm not trying to say your name. I promise you, I'm going to butcher it. What you can do for me is to help me say it right the next time so that I won't have to run into this problem again, right? So it's very much the same idea. It's the element of fear is only the fear itself. That old adage stands true. Embrace it, step into it, because we don't know everything, and it's okay.
Yeah, as long as your intentions are pure as you're going
Yeah,
into it and state
yeah.
them out front. Absolutely. I want to ask one more question about intersectionality, because I found that very interesting in our conversation. How can that be different within the LGBTQ2S plus community?
The difference is such that, again, when we're dealing with the element of identity politics, there's an overlay of a multitude of things. In typically in the queer community, the community voice has always been the white middle class male. Bring in an element of difference, it starts to overlay it with a host of other things as well. So being a racialized body in the queer community, I got aspects of my identity that folks actually have no problem with. I'm educated, I talk well, I dress a particular way, so folks feel, okay, no problem. But then the flip side from an intersectional point of view is the fact that I'm Black becomes another problem because, well, I remember having a conversation with my babysitter up the road that, she's afraid of Black men. And I'm like, what does that mean exactly? Well, she says, they carry themselves a particular way, they look a particular way. And then I say, but man, I'm Black. Oh, no, you're one of the good ones. You're not Black. You're one of the good ones. And so, again, it's this idea of there are elements about my person that folks just won't accept. And so when I think of in the queer community, it's one of the spaces that I think there's still a huge amount of racism. And so what folks are dealing with from an intersectional point of view in the queer community is I may be dealing with homophobia that is overlaid with racism, that could be overlaid with ableism or anything else. So it's multiple levels of issues that have to be dealt with. And the community is changing. We are seeing some voices that are, standing up and being more visible, but there's still a lot of work that has to be done. Because again, much like this conversation, a lot of folks in the queer community haven't understood or done work on what it means to be experiencing racism and to be gay. But then when you're experiencing racism in the gay community, it comes back to that old adage of, well, you're just being too sensitive. Well, to me, that's one of those microaggressions, and that's one of those pieces of unconscious bias that basically says that there's elements of what I'm saying, doing, and engaging in that you're just not comfortable with. And so that becomes your stuff, not mine. And so I'm probably different than a lot of people because I don't take on other people's stuff so well. I actually put it back on them so they can actually wear it themselves. But really, it's about, the idea of my being too sensitive is around I'm owning and naming something that's harmful or hurtful to me. And just think about disempowering that is to have somebody tell you that those feelings aren't real. And that is sort of the overlay of the intersectional piece for the queer community is we may experience multiple levels of discrimination and harassment that are just compounded one on top of the other.
Right. Wow. So, and these experiences, as we say, they shape us. It's how we show up. Oh, we've got Carla on for a
Oh,
question.
Hi, Nicole. Hi, Daryl. Great conversation so far. I have a staff question. So growing up, and this is from somebody that just posted in our questions box. So growing up, the term queer was a slur and something mean that you called someone. Well, we hear that term being used now. Is it a preferred term, and what does it mean?
This is a very good question, and it's one that I even talk to members of the queer community about, or the LGBTQS, LGBTQ2SI community a lot. Queer has become the umbrella term. It's the way to refer to the entire community, but there are components within the community. For example, the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender. There are elements in the community. Depending on who you are, depending on where you are in your own development, the use of the word queer is comfortable for some, but it's not for all. I'm a child of the 70s as well, and being queer in the 70s was not a good thing. It was, very negative, and it talked about, mental health and things of that nature. To first start to get comfortable using it as, being gay and being a member of this community and just hearing it, I was really, initially I was kind of taken aback as well, because I don't like the phrasing. But now it's become something that has become one of those words of reclamation. We're bringing it back, and we're trying to take the sting out of it and to create a space where it becomes a positive. And so it's a moniker for the entire community, because the community is constantly growing, changing, and coming up with different ways of identifying. And so this is a way of just encapsulating the whole community, and then again, recognizing that there are individual pieces underneath. People will adopt it, people won't use it. It's completely a personal choice.
Well, that's a really great question and a really insightful answer. Thank you for that. You mentioned a minute ago about racism and experiences and so on. And I asked you in our prep call if you'd be comfortable sharing your story of adopting your two children and some of the experiences that you went through.
It's one of these things that I do like to talk about, because I still can't believe some of the things I experienced along that journey. My partner and I decided to adopt in 2009, or actually 2008. We spent a year in the process. Most of that year, 10 months of it, was waiting to have a social worker assigned so that we could then have our home study done, all that fun stuff. Some of the questions that come up along the way were things like, if you're going to have children and they're going to be infants, who's going to change the diapers? Like the amount of, I think it's probably the one space where I can actually say, I now know what sexism feels like as a male identified body who has male privilege all over the place. I recognize what it's like to be a mother having to deal with some of the range of questions that gets asked. I can remember us traveling. We went to Cuba once, and somebody asked, I noticed that the two men are here. Where is the mother? And my comment is always something. Don't use my comments or my responses as yours, but mine work sometimes. My response was, she went for a swim and never returned. So again, it's like, the questions. It's really about, as Nicole was saying earlier, if you're going to ask a question, think about why you're asking the question. What's the intention for you of that question? If it's just to be nosy and find out where these kids came from, well, it's pretty easy. We're two guys. We can't produce. So you need to know that there's a mother somewhere. We just don't know who she is. And so that was really a real interesting experience for us as we went through that process. It's a process that I would recommend to everybody. If you don't have children, or if you do and you need some more fun around your house, fun, yeah, that's the word. Fun around the house. Kids are great. They're also work, but take the fun. Take the fun.
And it didn't take as long, you were saying, is what most people say.
No, I think for a lot of people, there's this fear around, again, that word fear, around how much do I tell the social worker? What do I engage in? Because the home study process is very, very in your face. I mean, they're asking everything from, when do you have sex? Do you walk around naked? Like all of these kinds of things in this process. And so, you have to give them what they're looking for, but you can also be able to manage that process a little bit. And so that's what we did the best at, was when we knew our social worker was coming, we set up our meetings. We organized the meetings to actually have the conversations. And then when we were placed with our kids, there's a 6-month window where you have a social worker every 6 weeks coming in and checking on you. What are you doing? How are things? What is that? And again, what I did was I turned the process into something of, here's the notes for what we're talking about today. So I set the agenda. And then I left a large body of time for the social worker to engage with the child, because that's what they're there for, not so much for me. And so again, I think there's a way that folks can actually engage in this. And I'm not saying that my story is the way for everybody, just like I'm not saying that my experience as a, Black, Mi'kmaq, queer male is the story for every person that fits into those identity groups. But my example is one that there are ways that we can actually play in the system to actually use the system for us rather than against us. And when we decided to adopt the social worker we had was I think the oldest social worker in the system, and she was the first social worker to have actually adopted a child for a same-sex couple. And so everything was by the book. There was no shortcuts. So, I mean, again, that felt a little bit odd because, I'd heard from some other people that they didn't have, somebody come through their house and tell me which cupboards I had to have locked up and where I had to have gates that needed to cover off certain staircases or whatever. Other folks didn't get that, but we certainly had to go through all of that stuff. Again, I think as a process, it could have been much worse. I think the worst part of the whole process for me, though, was when we got into talking about cross-racial adoptions. And so if you know about adoption, we know that about 60% of the kids in care are kids of racialized communities. And 70% of the folks wanting to adopt are white. And of that 70% that are wanting to adopt that are white, 90% of them want the infant baby girl. So the kids in care are coming with a bag of issues. So when they decide to have this conversation about culture, we spent 15 minutes talking about culture in the adoption process. And most of it was talking about how does somebody do a Black child's hair. I think I still have the pen mark on my leg where my partner stabbed me with a pen because he knows as a human rights officer, I had a whole lot to say, but I had to hold my tongue because, of course, the demigods of the social work world are at the front of the room and you're being watched on everything. So that was my adoption process.
That was your story. And what ages were your children when you adopted them?
My first was 18 months, and my second, who is the biological brother of my first, came at 6 months.
Oh, well, congratulations to you and your partner. I know what I'm calling running around in the background.
There are days when I'll say thank you, and then there's other days I was like, what the hell was I thinking? But thank you for today.
Okay, I want to switch gears a little bit. I thought that was a really good question that one of our staff members put in. And here's another question with pronouns. And can you share with us why it's important to respect someone's gender pronouns?
Well, the way I see pronouns is it's the way in which someone refers to us. It's like our names. And so as I was thinking about this, I came across a way that someone had explained pronouns to me in the past. And that is, the idea of gender is a universe. It's a broad spectrum of planets and stars in the sky that truly cannot be contained into a binary. So not just a male or a female. So when someone identifies with a pronoun, they're actually taking a little piece of that broad universe and identifying with that. And so to respect them and using the correct pronouns, you're actually validating them. You're sort of saying, yes, you're in the right identity, and it's very important that we're respecting you. The idea of the use of pronouns, it's new. We've grown up in society where we've only had the binary, male, female. Child is born. Are they boy or girl? Do I get pink or blue? All of those kinds of things come through. We know that there are folks who have been born that aren't seeing themselves and aren't feeling that they are the identity that was given to them at birth. And so the idea of the pronouns is to provide that person with the opportunity to take control of their lives and to say who they are. You don't have to necessarily agree with it, but you do have to respect it. So it's one of those things where if somebody tells you the pronouns are he and him, that's what you go by. I think the safety mechanism for people, that because again, they're worried about, well, what if I don't know the pronouns? What do I say? Whatever. Take the high road and just use they and them. It's a really easy way of being able to be inclusive without it being obtrusive to anybody. Folks will let you know later on what the situation is. And the other part of it is if you don't know, pull a person aside and say, what are your pronouns? And then once you have them, use them. But they're really important because they're markers of identity, markers of who I am, how I navigate the world.
Oh, thank you for that. I really appreciate that. I think it would be a good time for us to do a poll with all of our staff. So if we can pull the poll up. Again, this is voluntary and anonymous, but the question here is, have you ever worked with someone who has identified themselves to you as being part of the LGBTQ2S plus community? And I think this is really important because, you know, as I mentioned, it's the first time we're talking about this, the first time we even did some surveying within our organization to see how people identify and where they identify in cultures and so on. So I think this will be good, and it'll help with some of our next set of questions in the workplace.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to safe environment, which I know is something that is near and dear to your heart, especially at Ryerson, and near and dear to my heart. You mentioned before about people being their authentic selves and feeling safe, and you know that is my ultimate objective at
Right.
MPAC.
Well, and again, I think it's a matter of folks by and large don't tend to want to be treating people differently or othering people. But again, our society has socialized a lot of folks in ways that they're very much stuck. And part of the work here in terms of acceptance is recognizing what you have to do yourselves in order to be able to make a space viable and accepting for everyone.
Absolutely. Let's give it a few more seconds. See what our staff say. Okay.
Oh, great.
Yeah, that's great.
Now, I would argue, and I would lift up in my own sort of way, that those of you who say that you have not probably have. The person just wasn't out to you. They just didn't have the marker that you were looking for as what constitutes being a member of that community. And I think that's the thing that a lot of people think about or look at after the fact is, you know, how do you identify somebody that is or isn't? You know, do they carry themselves a particular way? Do they wear a particular kind of clothes? One of the things I'm constantly that I talk about within the queer community is the fact that I'm constantly told that I'm straight passing. I have no idea what that means because nothing about me is straight. Hasn't been straight in 30 odd years. But again, it's a case of this is one of the things that folks say it's meant to be. I think in some ways it's meant to be a negative. That, you know, because I don't talk a particular way, I don't look a particular way. I think in a large part when folks are thinking about people in the queer community, think about gay people, they're looking for people with you know, a particular way of talking, a particular way of moving, you know, a way that they may be very catty and chatty and things of that nature. I see that in the community, and I probably had a period in my life where I had that. I think I had a period of my life where I was a snap diva. Everything was a snap here and a snap there. But again, those are cycles that we go through. We go through change. We grow and develop, and you know, here we are now. I am who I am, and you know, it's that whole idea of if you don't like who I am, keep that to yourself because that's your stuff. Because again, we will talk about this somewhere along the way. I think there's legislation now that protects me and allows me to be me, and so you can have your ideas and thoughts. When you bring it forward, that's when we end up having different kinds of conversations.
I haven't heard that before. Snap diva. That's cute. So let's talk about this. What are some ways that organizations can create that safe environment for employees who do identify as part of the LGBTQ2S plus community so that they can feel comfortable speaking about their identity in the workplace? Because I agree with you. I think some of those people have said that they haven't worked with them. It's because maybe the other person didn't feel comfortable or they didn't ask. So,
Right.
So what are some ways that we as an organization and other organizations can do this?
Okay. I think about things like the element of intersectionality, right? This might be something that we'll do in particular, talking about somebody that's coming in the community that's from the queer community. But again, because of those intersections, these might have utility across the board. So there might be other places that we can use these. So things like, you know, avoid assumptions and questions that have value judgments attached to them. You know, in terms of saying things about, you know, what constitutes a marriage, or, you know, what is the proper mix of parenting. Is it has to be the man and the woman, those kinds of things. So just think about, I think for me, it's the idea of being very personal or very person-centered is the way I'm thinking about it, in terms of put that individual first. So much like we think about people with disabilities, we put the person first, not the disability. This is very much the same thing. We're dealing with people here. People have feelings, right? So other things that can be done is create space where open dialogues, create space for conversations, create space where, you know, people can identify and talk about who they are in different kinds of ways. Because again, we're all prioritizing those identities from a number of different vantage points. And, you know, depending on the environment in which someone might be in, one other identities might be more comfortable than others. And so it's a matter of, we create a space where this is a space to talk about everything. It leaves it at the door where folks can just bring their whole selves to work. Be sensible to, or be sensitive to the fact that some people just may not wish to share who they are. And that's okay, because the coming out process is not the same for everybody. The coming out process for me, or if there ever was a coming out process for me, I don't think I was ever in, but the coming out process for me when I actually had a conversation with my parents was much different from, say, my best friend who was tossed out of his house when the parents found out he was gay. I remember just places that I've been where this idea of the understanding of what being gay is was just so strange. My parents still have the 1973 Collier's Encyclopedia that lists homosexuality on the same page as bestiality, necrophilia, and personality disorder. Now, we've come a long way since then. I think it was up in 1979 where, you know, the whole idea of being gay was decriminalized in Canada. That was within most of our lifetimes, a very short time ago. But still, there's work to be done in those areas. So again, it's create space where folks can be themselves. I think the other thing, because I could go on all day with just this one question. The other thing is just to create a space of knowledge and understanding where folks can, again, bring themselves to spaces and be celebrated at various times. So much like we do celebration of Christmas and Black History Month and these other events, Pride is another one of those pieces of, we're basically just celebrating our community and saying, you're welcome here. We want you to be here, right? It's not really about that you have to say that you're in that community or whatever the case. It's about just recognizing the fact that it exists. You can't get rid of us, we're here. It's not that easy. So again, it's that old adage, you know, we're queer, we're here. I won't say the rest of it, but there's a couple of words that go in that are probably not appropriate for the call today. But those of you who know, you can share it with your friends. But the other thing as well is companies have to create space where they're actually systematizing complaint processes. So if you don't have a space, a human rights policy or a way of actually dealing with this, homophobia or homosexuality and gender identity and expression are two of the items that are covered under the Canada Charter of Rights and Freedoms, under the Canada Human Rights Code. These are protected grounds. So there's legislation that says, I can be me. And like I said before, if you've got a problem with me being me and any aspect of me, that is your stuff. You have to be the one to deal with that, because I'm still going to be me at the end of the day. It's when those things come forward and things are said where folks are maybe not meaning to be harmful or hurtful, but it comes across in a very negative kind of way where someone feels as though they're being challenged or being attacked in a particular way. That's when we have to look at this. And so a whole process of dealing with harassment and discrimination is really important, because again, sometimes it is a case of someone has said something that they didn't even realize was a problem. Again, we're dealing with intergenerational workplaces. I think at Ryerson, we have 5 generations of folks working. And so there's always a chance that something that was said 10, 15, 20 years ago that was okay then is not okay now. And so it's about adapting and adjusting to the times where we are currently. When we think about, you know, the population of the queer community, it's about 1/10 of the overall population of Canada. So 1 in 10 people is somebody that's probably a member of the queer community. Again, we're a large body of people. And so to really think about how do we deal with that, especially in some of our smaller communities. I mean, I'm from New Glasgow, Nova Scotia. The claim to fame for New Glasgow is I don't know how many folks on the call know who Viola Desmond is, but she's that new face on your $10 bill. The theater that she was thrown out of was in my hometown, right? So I know what this experience was like. I heard all of the terms. My family called me fruit, faggot, sissy, sister boy, Nelly, Cinderella. Like I got it all. And, you know, I look back and say they only were doing that because that's what they were taught. That's what the environment was then. Now I think it's quite different because I'm the one that's earning the most money in my family. You know, we've been able to use these things to move in a particular way. And so, not that I try to rub people's faces in it, but my sister came to visit me once and walked around my house, and she says, "I'm so impressed." And I'm like, "Why?" "I don't see any pink." I'm like, "Because I don't like pink." "What would I use pink for?" "Well, because in her mind, to be gay meant you had pink everywhere." Well, no, not finding pink in my house. So again, it's that thing about, you know, creating those spaces that people feel that they're protected in their workplace. They can be their full selves. They can bring themselves into the space. Now, I'm not talking folks who win and talk about their personal business on an ongoing basis, but you know, when you're having those parties and get-togethers, remember to make sure that folks are comfortable enough to bring their partner. How many parties did I go to before when I first came to Toronto because folks didn't know that I was gay then? How many parties did I go to not having anybody with me because I knew the places that I was working had problems? I actually was fired from 2 jobs for being gay. Never despair. It was good money at the end of it all. But again, it was those situations where, you know, folks have their thoughts and ideas, and my worldview, my job is not to change people. It's to provide them with other ways of seeing things, other ways of engaging with things. And so, again, if you are someone who says that you haven't been part of or connected to somebody that's queer or in that particular space, again, we're at the perfect time. Pride Month being a whole month of virtual activities, you can do it from your safety of your own home, and the only person that's going to see it is you and your internet provider. No, it's that situation where you can actually feel comfort. Because I think that's one of the things for people is, I don't attend Pride events because I don't want people thinking I'm gay. Well, I know so many straight people that actually attend Pride events because we are a lot of fun. We know how to have fun. We know how to party. We know how to, you know, do the stuff that needs to be done. And if you don't want to have fun, that's okay. Stay home. But, you know, there are ways that you can come out and have fun and enjoy yourself.
That's amazing. So much to unpack there, Daryl. You talked about so many different things. I mean, a couple of takeaways I'm taking is really dissecting the person and focusing on the person as opposed to, and it's like layering back the onion, right? There's so much to all of us. It's where we've come from. It's the experiences we've had. It's the families we grew up in, and really respecting that and being curious about that. And the other thing you mentioned was the space. And, you know, one of the terms that I've been using a lot lately is creating a safe space. It's good to have a safe space. But it was actually our equity and diversity and inclusion team that evolved that term to it being a brave space. And I like that term better. So brave. Yeah. So be brave to ask those questions you're fearful of. Be brave to share. And it's the only way we're going to learn is if we actually do that.
Well, brave space has been something that I've been using even before we at Ryerson brought the White Privilege Conference to the city. Brave space is one of those terms that I started to use because when I go into a session and I do any kind of education or engage with anybody, there is no way that I can create safety to the point of something that someone says is not going to impact someone else. I can't. It's just impossible to do. I mean, the only thing I can do in a safety situation such as that is, you know, if somebody picks up a chair to throw at somebody, I might grab the chair. I'm not getting in front of it, but I'll grab the chair so that it doesn't fly in a particular direction, right? That's the amount of safety I can create. Bravery is just that. It's that space where in any of my sessions, when folks are coming from around the institution, they know that they're walking into a space where they're going to be challenged. I'm going to push, I'm going to poke, I'm going to prod, because part of the work for me is if I don't create an element of discomfort, if I don't create something where folks haven't taken a moment to think about the way in which they might be reacting to something or the way in which they may have said something and not realized that it had an impact, if I don't make them realize that that's a problem, then I have done something wrong in the work that I do. I mean, for years, I used to worry about people leaving my workshops with smiles on their face. And then I came across an article that talked about, racialized people in this work being minstrels at the front of the room because that's what we're focused on. And so it used to be this thing of, we're going to have this conversation about homophobia. And knowing that I got a bunch of people around the table, I would say, well, I know none of you guys are homophobic, but, it's out there in the world. Well, no, that's not the case anymore. It's a case of, yeah, there's homophobia everywhere. We all are experiencing it in some way. It might be some internalized stuff. I might have some of my own stuff that I have to deal with, but it's also across the communities. And so it's just being able to open up the space so that folks fully engage. Example of this as well is something that's really relevant is the idea of Black Lives Matter, right? How many folks have actually attended a Black Lives Matter situation or protest? Black Lives Matter was developed, it was originally conceived by Black, gay, and lesbian and trans folks in the US. So it's a movement that's been started by the queer community, but the Black queer community. So again, it's when folks are thinking about, what is that? That's what it is. It's about being able to find the space where I can bring my voice into the room and not be silenced based on the fact that I look different from someone else.
That's so important. This is such an amazing conversation. I know we've gone a little bit over time, but I do want to ask this question before we wrap up, because again, this is for our employees. It's for all of us to learn, for all of us to grow and develop. We've talked a lot about what people who are outside of the LGBTQ2S plus community should be doing, but what if you are part of that community and you don't feel safe in the workplace? What can those employees do?
Well, I think there's a number of things that can be done. Firstly, it's, again, look at the element of safety for yourself. Is the environment an environment where you want to challenge the notion of something that's occurred, or is it something that you want to take some time and actually get some assistance on? So look for your allies. Allies are those people that actually are engaged in the work. They're also folks that actually stand up and take notice of things. So they're not just folks that, write a check every year and say, I'm an ally to a community. Allies are actually folks that are actually action oriented. They're in there doing something. And so again, it's look for your allies. It's look for folks from your own networks. Talk to people that have actually experienced things and come up with a strategy as to how you want to handle this. If it's a boss or a supervisor, you have the ability to go talk to that person. Again, frame it from the point of view of, when I hear you say these things, this is how it makes me feel, and I wonder if we can have some dialogue. Again, if it doesn't go the way you want it to, I'm sure there are human resources structures that are in place across impact organizations that you can go to. And all of them will be mandated to have a process that looks at harassment, discrimination in the workplace. It's really about how do we make these spaces safe for all. But the real piece that I would push to is, I know you have an equity committee. Well, why not have some affinity groups? Why not have an LGBT affinity group? A community network is what I call it, where folks who are from the queer community can come together. And just for an hour or so on that call, when we're hanging out, I can just be gay, or I can just be Black, right? So that it allows us to tease out parts of our identity, but it allows us to sit with those features that are happening. And it doesn't have to be just an ongoing session where we're complaining, but it could be a place where we're actually learning. My community networks at Ryerson have become spaces that I go to first. If I get a complaint or a question that comes in through the university about something that's related to the queer community, I'm not the only gay in the village, so I go to the village and say, talk to me, folks. What should we be saying to this? And I'll use that community as a way of actually giving information to the decision makers or the higher ups, people with pay grades bigger than mine. Pass it on to them so that they can actually use the information from the community to actually talk about what needs to happen for the community. So it's that old adage of nothing about us without us. It's very much a disability adage, but it works across all identities. So really it's about find your space, gain your comfort, recognize what processes are available to you, talk to people that need to be talked to, and if all else fails, get yourself an employment lawyer and have fun.
Thank you for that. And we do have an HR department, a wonderful HR department. That's where your friend Crystal works. So yeah, but I really love your suggestion with the equity, diversity, and inclusion team that we have. And I know they're all listening on the call, so I'm sure they'll come back and add that to some of their next dialogue. So I want to thank you so much for joining us. I feel like I wish we had another hour to go over this. It's so wonderful. And I'm really looking forward to celebrating Pride this month. I'm not sure if the flag has been raised yet. We had to defer the flag at our office because of the lowering of the flag for the 215
Right.
Indigenous children. So anyone who was waiting for the Pride ceremony at head office, that is the reason why it's been delayed. But I'm not sure what the status update is, but we'll make sure we get that out to everyone. So thank you
Now,
again.
question for you. When you put the
Yes.
flag up, does it stay up all month?
I believe it's all month. Yeah.
Okay. Because what we've been doing is we've been putting the Canadian flag above it and putting the Pride flag on the same mast pole so that both are flying at the same time. Because we had this problem of, do we do it or not? So, sorry.
No,
Thanks.
that's good. That is how we've been doing it. And I believe it is all month. But I know last year we had both flying. So now we don't control it. It's actually the landlord, but we have a little bit of influence with the landlord because it's our logo on the building. Anyway, thank you again for joining us. And
problem.
thank you all of you for joining. Next week on Wednesday, June 9th, we have our EMG Ask Us Anything. As you know, that's one of my favorite ones. And we have our DiversaPro consultant will be coming in to give us an update on our equity, diversity, and inclusion journey. So I want to thank you again. Have a great rest of your day. And thank you for all your stories and your candor. And thank you, everyone. And I hope everyone has a great rest of their day on Wednesday. And we will see you next week. It's great to see you again, Daryl.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.